before Engager, I was at a company who we closed Google as our one of our big marquee accounts. They never got up and running because we couldn't onboard and support them. So the best that we did was just use them on the customer company logo wall on the website. That's it. They never got up and running, and they stopped even trying to onboard. Like, you know what? This is already sunk cost for us. We know we're not going to get this past security now, which we should have done in the diligence process. But then, yeah, we lost one of our biggest potential logos because the sales team was good at selling ABM, but the actual support team was not good at supporting those large enterprise accounts.
Hello and welcome to Best Story Wins. I'm your host, Josh, and I'm here with my co host, Jason. And today our guest is Brandon Redlinger. Hey, Brandon, thanks for joining us today.
Of course, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, Brandon.
Yeah, man. So Brandon, you recently uh, went fractional. What led to that decision and how has that been treating you so far?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't really mean to go fractional. I know it seems to be the trend these days, and after I wrapped up my last gig at Chili Piper, I had someone reach out to me and say, "Hey, by the way, are you doing fractional?" And I was like, "Well, I was gonna take a little bit of a break, but, this seems like a good break. Sure, let me test this out." And then I just had more demand, come inbound. Once someone heard that I was doing fractional, I had a few more come inbound, and then decided, "You know what? I'm gonna lean into the fractional thing in 2025." So I committed, "Let me give this a fair shot. Let me actually try this whole fractional thing." And there are pros and cons. I think it's for some people and it's not for others. And, yeah, we'll see if I end up still doing it long term, or maybe I go back in-house sometime. But for me in my stage where I'm at right now with, like, my fam, I got 2 young little kids, like, it's a great option for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know we just kind of jumped into it there and you mentioned Chili Pepper, but before we dig in a bit further here, would you mind giving us a little bit of an overview of your backstory?
Yeah, for sure. So, um, yeah, I always tell people my first real job out of college was in SDR, and, this was way before they called it an SDR, right? Like, the book Predictable Revenue, I think just had come out or comes out, like, the next year or something. But the company that I was at was pretty forward thinking, and they had already specialized the meeting setting role with the account executive role that actually closes the deals. So I started out as an SDR, did that for a bit, and then ended up moving into an AE role where I carried a bag and carried a quota for it was about 2 years. But I really always had a passion for marketing and for growth. So I made the move over to the growth side of things and the marketing side of things. And that's when I really fell in love with the idea of using marketing, fell in love with the idea that marketing isn't just about, the brand and the color brochures. You can actually marry it with the metrics, and you can figure out, if I put in $1 in over here, 30 days later comes out $1.05. If I put in $1 in over here, 40 days later comes out $1.10. I was like, okay, this can actually be a scientific thing. So that's when I really dove deep into the tech side of marketing and made my way out to Silicon Valley and San Francisco area, and had a few jobs, was the first marketing hire for a few companies, and then also got hired by John Miller at Engagio. I think that's where a lot of my formative years, really growing up, so to speak, in B2B SaaS came in. And then we got acquired by Demandbase, was there for a little bit, leading ABM and demand gen, and then moved over to a few other companies, and then ended up, at Chili Piper, and then after Chili Piper again, now here we are going fractional. So doing a little bit of everything for mainly still B2B SaaS companies.
That's awesome. And let's talk a little bit about Forge, the community you co-created with JK Sparks.
Absolutely.
What sparked that idea and what's been most surprising about managing your own community?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe I'll start there first. Like, it's hard. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be surprised that it's hard, but so JK, actually, I knew him before I realized he lives like 2 minutes away from me. We were chatting, and I'm like, "Wait, you live in Colorado? I live in Colorado. Oh, you live in the Springs? I live in the Springs. Oh, the North End." And then I told him exactly where I lived, and he's like, "Dude, you could probably look out your office window and see my house. Like, that's how close we are." And then we just started hanging out a lot more, and realized we both had a passion for just helping other marketing leaders advance their careers. I get a lot of, joy and satisfaction out of just helping other people. So the community really is about helping those. either first time marketing VPs or they're looking to get that first time role, really just taking their experience, taking what we've learned to help them really succeed at their role or again find their first VP role. So that really is what the community is mainly built around. But then going to your second question there again is yeah, like I thought just launching the community and opening things up, it was going to be a little bit easier to keep the momentum. And they say like 50 people in the community is roughly where you get sort of a tipping point, and we're at 200 and it doesn't feel like we're at a tipping point right now. Even though most of them are more experienced marketing leaders, we still have a lot of people who are just pretty passive, right? They go in there, they read the comments, they read the articles that we post, they maybe attend an event, but they're still not actively posting and replying and engaging in that conversation yet. So that was the hardest part and the biggest learning.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and I know, yeah, a lot of people talk about this. It's very easy to like wax poetic about the value of building a community, right? Especially like around a brand. Uh, but it's certainly beyond, a newsletter is probably a decent starting point, but yeah, it sounds like you're aspiring to have like true contributors and sense of ownership, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I know, especially in around like Web3 communities and so forth, you see like, w- you know, some things can get kind of unwieldy around communities as they get a lot larger, and you have different people expecting different things from a community. I guess to some extent you're hoping to have that kind of problem, right? Where it's so big, it's unwieldy, but there is a lot of value in sometimes the smaller, more tight knit, high quality community, which it sounds like you're building a really curated group, right? Not just going for numbers.
And it's being really intentional with exactly what we're posting and how we're talking about things, right? Like again, like we really want to serve a specific niche, and we want to talk about the things that aren't being talked about right now, or the things that they don't tell you about being a first time VP, or the things that they don't tell you about even something as simple as like how to get an interview for the first time VP role. A lot of those roles aren't, posted publicly, and you have to work through recruiters, and there's a lot of back channels, and there's just a whole different game you got to play. And so we're writing about things like that, or even a lot of the things that I wish I knew as a first time executive on executive compensation and how to negotiate and all the things that you should consider when actually signing your offer. So yeah, I think it's probably one of the only communities that's really going deep on just specifically, this for marketing leaders.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love how focused it is. That's not something that I think everybody is doing. A lot of times, communities, they get pretty broad, maybe too broad. Um, on that note, I know, just based on our last conversation, you mentioned that you're part of several communities. I'm curious, since communities are having a bit of a moment in B2B, um, is there a common thread that you've noticed amongst those that are doing community well? And if so, what is it?
One of the things that I really go back to a lot is like so many people think about community as just changing what people know, give them more information, more information, more information. I think that's a good part of how you build a good community, but less about changing what people know, but more about changing how people feel, right? Like I'm really trying to change how people feel about being supported as that marketing leader. And how do I do that? A lot of it is through the discussions and through the content that we create. So that's how I think about it. And that's how I think a lot of like the other communities that I'm a part of and pretty active in. Well, there's just really two. I would say one is Pavilion and then Exit 5, and those are again like-minded people, and then yeah, like-minded people that are really offering support there for each other. But even within the communities, it almost feels like there's a little bit of a sub community. Like Pavilion is so big, it's like 10,000 plus members, right? And the active channels that I'm really in, it's the CMO channel, right? It's not I'm in 50 different channels. I mean, I'm in a lot of different channels, but I don't pay attention to them at all. And the relationships that I've really built are the ones that are specifically or that have come out of that channel. and same with Exify. Big fan of Dave Gerhardt and what he's doing over there. And then yeah, a lot of things too is like you get out of the community what you put into it. A lot of people ask me, "Hey, should I join Pavilion? Should I join Exit 5?" It's like, well, that all depends. Like, I know plenty of people who join and they don't get anything out of it and they leave, and it's like, okay, what did you do to try to actually get the value from it? Um, and the answer really is they didn't do a whole lot.
I pitched my services once, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right?
Didn't get positive ROI in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's funny. So I wanted to talk a little bit about category creation, since I know that's a theme that's sort of surrounded Engagio and then later at Demand Base. But you all played those companies played a big role in creating a category. I think everyone can recognize that. Um, Curious to understand like what you can share with us about what that process was like from the inside. And a lot of people want to create a category. Not everyone should be, not everyone can. What do you think most people get wrong with either the decision to create a category and just in their approach, their GTM, if you will?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this because I've done it successfully at, like you said, Engagio and Demand Base, creating the ABM category and evolving that. And then also unsuccessfully at other companies. Because, like you said, everyone wants to create the category these days. I think the few things that people get wrong about category creation is they think that they can just name the category and it's the person that shouts the loudest about it with the biggest pockets or whatever is going to be the one that creates the category. Whereas like the market defines the category, not the company who's trying to shout the loudest, and also the markets create the hot companies out there, right? I recently was doing an event with Udi over at Gong, and he said, "No, you're totally right. Like we actually." Got lucky with what we were built, or their founders had that vision, but it was the right time for that software and exactly what they need. And then they listened to the market to build it to make sure they became that category leader. But it wasn't them initially going out and saying, we're going to dominate this conversation intelligence space, which then turned into the revenue intelligence space. It was, hey, this is a hot market on the way up. Let's actually build something useful for the people there. So I think that's one thing that people get wrong. But when I think about category creation, it really is like it's serving an underserved subset of a bigger category. And I like the guys at Category Design and John Ruggie. He writes about this too. But like category design is taking bigger context, finding out what's missing, and then there is usually some sort of innovation that comes along to now make that subset, that subcategory, in even bigger categories, because that's where a lot of categories grow out of, right? It starts as something small, a subset of another category, and then really expands into that bigger category. So yeah, I know I just said a lot of things, and I've got a lot of other thoughts about that too. But yeah, early on in the Engagement days, we never said the word category design or category creation. It was just us doing good marketing.
That's interesting. Just even thinking about uh, John Miller's previous life at Marketo, and we worked pretty closely with that team, and we saw these like quarterly themes emerge. There was a lot of like in their competition with Eloqua and uh, HubSpot. Like, what's that other company? Oh yeah, HubSpot, that little one. Yeah, the it was interesting, right? Because there was such a battle for category creation and like just like coining terms that you could own. Obviously, inbound marketing being one of those with HubSpot, but I remember these themes, like revenue performance management and like, just say, so yeah, it's interesting that, yeah, it must be just like a thing that's like second nature as just part of, doing marketing. Even with like ABM, obviously was kind of like a new space of sorts, right? I mean, even though some of the behaviors were old or classic, it's like kind of a new space that was defined and created that certainly Engagio was capitalizing on.
Yeah, and too many people focus on like the term itself, whereas the most important thing is actually just creating a message that's clear and that resonates. right? And then you listen to the market, and they'll really define that. They're the ones who, again, determine whether there's a market there or not. And most of the times, they're the ones that really determine the name of the category too. And it's a lot of like listening to the market and getting that feedback. Not so much about, again, just picking the name. It has nothing to do with you. I've led this process for a lot of companies, and they always start off with, okay, what's the name of the category that we should go and create? It's like, okay, now let's actually make sure the message is crystal clear and it resonates with the right people. And then from there, we can do some more listening and we can figure out what the market is really grabbing onto. And then we can help shape that. Because a lot of the things I think we did well at Engagio was um, more category design. How do we actually influence how people think about this category? We weren't the first ones to the ABM space. And like you said, Jason, the ABM had been around uh, a little bit before, and a lot of the ideas obviously have. But a lot of what we did was try to shape how people think about it. And then our main approach was, let's actually be helpful and let's actually evangelize the category and evangelize the people. So we would even team up with some of the other players, competition in the space to again help lift up the entire space. Back then it was the main players were like Demand Base, Engagio, and probably Terminus were the big three, 10 years ago. And then Six Sense emerged, and then we got acquired by Demand Base, and then that continued to evolve into what it is today. But yeah, I think a lot about the early things that we did, like helping people talk about ABM by introducing new language. I think one of the brilliant things that John Miller did in category design is he had a story that everyone immediately heard and was able to immediately know what he was talking about, and then also turn around and be able to tell someone else that. And his was fishing with nets versus fishing with spears. You don't have to be, a rocket scientist to figure out what that means and how to apply that to marketing. And you can so easily turn around and then tell that to someone else. So we had plenty of people out there in the market using that same analogy that weren't even customers of ours. Maybe they would become customers later. I mean, I still hear it today, 10 years later. People are still using that analogy. And again, that helped us just lift up the entire category.
That's so cool. So in this progression in your career, you've seen a lot of different go-to-market motions from the inside. What are some of the most common ways companies mess up the overall GTM strategy?
Great question. Since I work with a lot of earlier stage companies now, I think I think it's a few things. Like early on, speed of learning matters more than anything. A lot of companies right now, like it's easier than ever to start a company now and to build product. Um, But that means there's so much more noise out there, and again, speed of learning is gonna help companies, really accelerate their product market with their journey to product market fit. And then also after you find that product market fit, it's not always guaranteed that you're gonna keep product market fit. So after you do find that product market fit, you have to be constantly questioning your own hypothesis about the value that you're delivering to your customers, and it's always talking to customers, and you can't just be talking to the same ones, 'cause I've seen CEOs, fall to this as well, is they have their top 5 customers that they've had since day 1 and that they always keep going back to for advice and feedback, but they end up not representing once you're to 100 customers or 500 customers, they're not actually representative of your ICP anymore. So now you're building for someone because they have the loudest voice, they have the CEO's ear. You're not actually building something for someone who's very representative of your overall, ICP anymore. So that's always something that I caution. Like when new marketing leaders join companies, most of them these days know that they have to go on this listening tour, talk to customers, and instead of just going, "Hey, CEO, what customer should I be talking to?" "Oh, my buddy over here. He talks to me all the time. Go talk with him." It's actually, let me talk to your customers that maybe aren't happy. Let me talk to your customers, or maybe even talk to customers who haven't bought from you, who decided not to buy from you. Right? That was a big unlock for me at Chili Piper. I was in the RevOps space and knew a lot of people who I was pretty close with and built relationships beforehand that I talked to and got their insights because they didn't buy, and that was more helpful than talking to the customers that did buy, because they just want to make you happy and stay on your good side, you know.
Yeah, man, that's such great feedback. Yeah, some of our best nuggets of wisdom that we're able to um, access came from those "Why didn't you buy from us?" conversations. They're not fun, but they're so useful.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so, if you've gone anywhere near LinkedIn over the last couple of years, you've, probably noticed the brand versus demand conversation, right? Like, it's something that people have talked about a lot. You've actually written a lot about the importance of aligning brand and demand. What does that to you look like in practice, and how do you think some of the best teams out there are pulling it off today? And yeah, feel free to shout a few people out if any come to mind.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts on this. So, brand shapes the story, and demand really turns that story into revenue. And I think you have to have both, right? And I think a lot of people these days realize that, yeah, actually, maybe brand does play a bigger role than we give credit for. But brand is something that, like, it compounds over time, and what that you get compounding, trust, which leads to lower CAC and a pipeline that closes faster, right? It's a longer term game, and then demand is a little bit more on the shorter term side. So brand, like, it's a pipeline accelerant, and it's not just a nice to have anymore, because so many companies, they sound the same. If you go to any company in any space, like, they all sound the exact same thing. Like, yeah, they all sound the exact same, and you could swap out the name and it would still be relevant to the next company. So I think companies more these days are winning on brand. And when you have a strong brand, you can have an average or mediocre demand gen motion and still succeed. But on the other hand, if you have a weak brand and a strong demand, there's no guarantee that you're going to succeed still. So I think there's a lot to be said about balancing the two and doing the two together and doing it right.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, if your demand motion is strong and the brand is weak, it's like you got really efficient at telling a subpar story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Shifting gears a little bit, just looking at the overall trends in B2B marketing, what do you think is happening now that's really here to stay and, not just flashy tactics, but, representing really long-term shifts in how the best teams are going to market?
I mean, maybe the obvious one is AI, and we don't need to go into that because everyone's probably heard enough about AI, or that there's probably other resources than me to to talk about AI. But AI is definitely one of them. Not to replace any of your current, go to market or marketing motions, but just to really augment it and make you a lot more efficient and effective. Aside from that, I think some of the other ones that I think a lot about are just a hybrid selling motion these days. So most of us came up through sales led motions, but now we have PLG, and we have channel and partnerships, and we even have like influencers and communities as ways to go to market and build that demand motion. I think that one is definitely here to stay, because there's more consolidation in the space. And then a lot of companies have to go multi-product, and then they also go multinational now if they really want to grow. Um, so there's definitely a lot of different ways that people are going to market. And I think we just have to, the smart marketing leaders of the future are going to just have to be more proficient in many of the go-to-market motions. And the other tricky part of that too is, like, a CEO talks to his buddy who's in a completely different industry selling something completely differently, and he says, or she says, PLG is the way to go. We're seeing such success with PLG. He turns around and says, "Hey team, we need to do PLG because my buddy over here is doing PLG and it's successful to them." I'd like that. There's also risk with all of these new GTM motions popping up. You just have to make sure that it is the right one for you. It makes the most sense for you to do, and make the most sense for you to do right now. Because a lot of companies too who are really switching over to PLG, they weren't set up for PLG. They don't even have the infrastructure behind it. Or it could be the other way too. Like, we saw this a lot in the ABM days, when this was first a big thing. Is companies would say, yeah, we need to do ABM. Their sales team got really good at ABM, but then their customer onboarding team and the customer success and support team and the devs, they couldn't handle these giant accounts. So before Engager, I was at a company who we closed Google as our one of our big marquee accounts. They never got up and running because we couldn't onboard and support them. So the best that we did was just use them on the customer company logo wall on the website. That's it. They never got up and running, and they stopped even trying to onboard. Like, you know what? This is already sunk cost for us. We know we're not going to get this past security now, which we should have done, in the diligence process. Um, but then, yeah, we lost one of our biggest potential logos because n- the sales team was good at selling ABM, but the actual support team was not good at supporting those large enterprise accounts.
It's super interesting. Um, and also tragic, um, for the sales and marketing team. Um, if you had to place a bet on where brand marketing is headed, what would that what would that be?
I think brands have as much to do with the people these days because and even like people like Elon Musk or Mark Benioff, they're faces of their companies, but I think now even more like just social media is giving anyone and everyone a voice, and a lot of individuals at companies want that stronger voice. So brain is expanding further than just the corporate side and really expanding to include the individuals as well. So I do think a lot of people trying to grow their own brand for the company is a great thing, but you also have to be careful about how you're doing it and how you enable and how you police that at your company. Easier to do with a smaller company, harder to do obviously at the bigger companies. But I do think you know having a leader at your company with that strong personal brand is going to help the company brand a lot. So I think it's definitely going in that direction. Also, just with like the rise of influencer marketing and create this creator economy, so you can even start to partner with these influencers and creators, and we're seeing companies do that really well and doing that a lot. Like Clay, for example, is probably the first one that comes to mind with their clay influencers and their clay books, created all of those things with these big influencers on social media, specifically LinkedIn right now.
Yeah, Clay's doing some really cool stuff on that front. I'm uh, really interested in your perspective on overall sales and marketing alignment. What are some real world examples where you've seen that alignment really pay off or totally break down?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it's funny because like I remember writing about this 10 years ago before I was even at Engagio, and everyone was saying, "Oh, sales and marketing, it's the future and everyone needs to figure this out." And here we are 10 years later, and people are still trying to figure out what does that actually mean? What does that look like? And I think there are a few things that I'll have to say about that. Like a lot of people think like you have to get along with your sales counterpart. I don't think it has anything to do with getting along with them and making sure that like you are buddies. I think that's icing on the cake if you are, but I think it's checks and balances and just making sure you're aligned both strategically and tactically, and you have respect for each other and the job that you're doing. So strategically, that looks like it's like agreeing on definitions and your metrics, having shared goals and objectives, um, even something as simple as speaking the same language, uh, and then do things like joint campaign planning, do retrospectives together, do those QBRs together, and then I do think the most impactful thing that you can do is just align on compensation. I don't think marketing should go all the way up to revenue, but maybe a little bit closer to revenue, like qualified pipeline, and then sales maybe comes down a little bit. Maybe they're also comped partially on how much pipeline they can self-generate or something. And then how are we comped on these shared accounts that we're going after? And then tactically, that looks like weekly one-on-ones, that's, shared dashboards, that's weekly or bi-weekly pipeline reviews that you're doing together with your ops team. um, and then also like sales joins marketing meetings, marketing joins sales meetings. stuff like that. Having SLAs, having those open lines of communication. The best uh, VP of sales that I've ever worked with, we had a good relationship in that. Like if he had an idea, he would just Slack me or he would just call me. It's not, hey, what, I'm gonna wait till we have our weekly meeting to bring this up. It's, hey, let me just jump on a quick call with you real quick, Brandon. Let me flesh this idea out. Ah, you know what? Maybe this isn't a good idea. Or yeah, I love that. Let me build on that. So, and that's how I think about aligning sales and marketing is, again, strategically at the higher level, and then there are those technical things that you have to do every day to make sure you are aligned and you stay aligned.
So you talk to a lot of marketing leaders in your community, and a lot of people that are, I imagine, stepping into new roles or about to step into new roles. Um, what are some of the things that you see as like most important things for marketing leaders that are looking to set themselves up for success when they take on a new role at a new company?
Yeah, I wrote about this on LinkedIn recently, but like the average tenure of a CMO in SaaS is 18 months, which, first initially shocked me, but after again experiencing it myself and talking to a lot of others, I think there's a bunch of reasons for this, and I think the biggest one is misaligned expectations with the CEO and the executive team, but mostly the CEO from the start. I think a lot of people know that they have to align on expectations and they should do that in the interview process. But I think what ends up happening is either that changes or the CEO was just being nice. Everyone can pretend like that, everyone can play nice for, an hour during an interview or a few hours after that, or even the first few weeks. But a lot of the frustration that marketers and marketing leaders have uh, in general with the role is actually dealing with the wild the expectations of the CEO, often unrealistic, wildly unrealistic, and completely misaligned with what you initially thought. And yeah, I think that's kind of a sore spot with a lot of marketing leaders because, like, again, through the community and just through my own network, I talk to a lot of marketing leaders who are now even saying, you know what, I don't even want that CMO role anymore. I'm willing to take a step back to work for a CMO that gets to deal with the crazy CEO asks and the change in direction all the time and the mismanaged expectations that are wildly out of touch with reality. So I think the biggest thing really there is, when you're trying to um, when you are joining a new company and looking at the new roles, how do you actually figure out, is this a CEO I can work with in the long term? And I think there's a lot of things you can do too, like asking the right questions about the culture, and then triangulating. This is what this executive said, and this is what the other executive said, and you can actually glean a lot from even talking with board members. Um, I would say probably half the time I'm interviewing for executive roles and get to the final stages, they put me in touch with a board member, but other times they don't, and I've asked for it. And they would say, "Okay, yeah, let me get back to you on who I wanna put you in touch with." But I think it's completely fair for you to ask that. And then also go out and talk with people that have worked there in the past but don't work there anymore. I think that's a huge one. They're back channeling you, going back to, kind of where we started the conversation. Um, there are a lot of things that happen at the executive hiring level that don't happen at the other levels, and one of the main things is back channels, and they're back channeling the heck out of you. So, hey, you should be back channeling the heck out of them too, as much as you can.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Um, Curious if you have a take on why the CMO tenure is as short as it is. Is it a matter of um, bad fit? Is it a matter of unrealistic expectations? Maybe those things, something else, something different.
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I do think a lot about that. I think aside from the unrealistic expectations, like the marketing role is hard because of the depth and the breadth of the job. You know, you have to you have to also, like, you have to be good at demand gen and branding and paid acquisition and content marketing and product marketing and revenue operations and et cetera, et cetera. Like, there's so much that goes into the marketing role, and you have to be like people expect you to be good at all of the things. Whereas, in reality, most marketing leaders will either be good at, brand, demand, or corporate comms, then they'll be pretty good at another, and then they'll have a blind spot or gap in the other. And I think it's just setting those expectations from the beginning with the team. Hey, being clear, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm pretty good at, and this is my blind spot, and I need to hire for those for the right uh for the right person to support the team. Um, so I think that's one is breadth and depth of the job. The other one is just like keeping up with the market. Keeping up, that there's I think Latney over at Six Sense was the first one to say, "I'm not the chief marketing officer, I'm the chief market officer." And more, I believe in marketing's ability to read and predict the market is going to determine their actual success on the job. So how do you read the market and then figure out, okay, where should I be placing my bets for future success in marketing? And that's hard too, because that's a longer term thing. And a lot of CEOs, they want those results right now. Um, but you have to be able to balance the short term with the long term thinking.
Yeah. I think that's a great take. I mean, I remember when I first read that, that post on, "I'm not the chief marketing officer, I'm the chief market officer." Um, that was kind of a light bulb moment for me, and it kinda made me think that, in that framing, it's like, if you're the CMO, your job is kinda to be the CEO's right hand, like, you're like CEO junior, right? Like, you're seeing where is the company going, and you're looking at it from the perspective of, like, not just what we want to do, but, like, what does the market want from us? And it's almost a different I mean, there's a lot of overlap with doing marketing, but it's in some ways sort of a different skill set or different, um, type of person that's wired to do that work. Um, or at very least, you need to have the margin to, like, lift your head up and take the time to see, okay, what are people actually talking about? To your point, like, talking to customers that buy, customers that don't buy. And it was a really interesting kinda reframe for me, and I love that line of thinking.
Yeah, and you need to be the voice of your customer in the room, in the boardroom, in the executive room, because a lot of times there is no one else to really represent the voice of the customer. I think marketing, especially marketers with a product marketing background, are the best suited to be able to be that person.
Yeah, there's an interesting connection to what you're saying earlier about, you know, category creation and ownership, right? It's really easy with, and you mentioned that it comes down to like clear messaging that resonates with your market and audience. And it's interesting as you're talking about this, it makes me think like it's just so easy to get navel gazy, and to think about like what do we want to say? And it takes a lot of discipline and rigor to, you know, even just put yourself out there to go talk to the market instead of the people on your own team about what you should be saying and doing, right? Um, I'm curious, as you think about your own evolution too, and like keeping up with things, how do you personally keep sharp and continue to evolve your own thinking, especially now that you're operating more independently?
Yeah, great question. I think, well, for me, um, I've always been the type that wants to continuously learn, and I'm always looking for the latest podcast or people to connect with. So I think just having that natural curiosity. But I honestly, the most of my learnings and most of the uh, you know people that challenge my thinking are just real conversations that I have with people in my community, whether that is someone from the Forge community that I'm creating or someone in Pavilion. I'm taking some of the Pavilion courses like the CMO school and CRO school and COO school. And I've had just such interesting conversations with a very diverse set of people with that come from different backgrounds. So it is always just kind of looking outside of what's directly in front of me and the people that I talk with every day and trying to expand a little bit. And I mean, for me, it's also just let me offer help. Let me see how I can help other people and have interesting conversations, because then it usually helps me as much as anything. Someone's challenge facing a specific challenge. I think I know it, and then when I try to actually answer it and write it down, turns out maybe I don't know it as well as I thought I did, or I can start to crystallize some of my thoughts a little bit more. I think about, generally this is my thought about it, but I can't waffle. I got to take a side. Let me just think through it and talk through it a little bit more and develop my thinking, and develop my opinions on specific things. And then, I mean, kind of going back to what we were talking about, always questioning your customers and the value you're delivering to them. Always questioning your own thinking too. Always, be open to being wrong. Be open to things changing and you learning different things.
Brandon, this has been awesome. I know we're almost at time, but is there anything that you're working on right now that you're especially excited about and that you want and can mention?
Yeah. The thing I'm most excited about working that I'm working on right now is the Forge community, and just again helping people out there, connecting with those people in real life, whether that is like over Zoom or even in person. Yeah, like I mentioned, JK is just right down the road from me, and it's been great just hanging out a lot with him, and even like our kids get along really well, and our wives get along really well, and they're all gardening together now and everything. So yeah, it's that's one thing that I've really enjoyed doing, is building the forge. And just also really excited about just the clients that I've taken on for my fractional job right now. Again, not for everyone, but I'm really enjoying it right now, and I think fractional as a model is here to stay.
Yeah, that's really cool. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us today. For people that want to find you online and learn more, where's the best place for them to do so?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. I'm relatively active on LinkedIn, although if you send me a connection request, um, I generally only tend to look at the ones with an actual message on it. So include an actual message on your LinkedIn connection request, and I'm more than happy to accept the request and then continue the conversation. Also, check out the Forge, just forgemarketing.tech. Or you could just go to my LinkedIn. It's right there on LinkedIn. But yeah, always happy to connect with anyone out there. Again, love chatting with people and seeing how I can help, because it also helps me at the same time.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.